In order to apply heat sinks, first of all you want to use some thermal compound because it helps to dissipate the heat evenly through the chip. You barely want to use any, perhaps with the amount of a very tiny pea, and then use a piece of plastic like a credit card and rub it over the chip to make it nice and even. Adjust it in different positions. It's less critical on a chip like this, it only gets reasonably hot, than for example with the Dreamcast it does get very hot indeed. That's a pretty good covering. What we then need to do, these are 4mm high heat sinks. They're just referred to, for example, on eBay as for VGA memory heat sinks. They do the job very well indeed. Place them in position. The thermal compound is only very slightly tacky, like toothpaste effectively, so it won't hold them in place if the system is turned upside down and shaken, for example. So what we're going to do to secure those in place is to drag some wires, obviously with the ends cut off, just across so that the heatsink is secured across the middle in this sort of position, and one across here for each of the heat sinks. That will not only maintain the pressure of these heat sinks onto the chip itself, which is the whole point of this, but it will also stop them from coming off. And this is what I was talking about, the wires and stretched across with hot glue keeping them firmly in place. If you don't have any of the thermal compound, you can always, as a free alternative, use the gunk from the back of the heat sinks that came originally from the N64. It's not as good as using something as a paste, but it is a good free alternative. So here's the expansion pack and the jumper pack. The differences are, from a portable's point of view, that the jumper pack uses very slightly less amperage than the expansion pack. However, the expansion pack will play all of the N64 games, whereas jumper pack can't quite play all of them, like Majora Mask and one or two others like that. Donkey Kong comes to mind as well. The board for the jumper pack is smaller. We just take the top off. This is what it's like before you undo the two screws here, and you can make the board really quite tiny just by effectively taking off the side groundings, and you can see here there's a row of little holes that you can cut just above those, so you end up with quite a tiny little board. In comparison, the expansion pack, when that is opened up, is slightly larger, and again we take this one off, you can see where all the groundings are. That can be trimmed down the same fashion with the sides off, and also down again with the row of the little pins that go through. So that's about the maximum we can trim this board down to. What I've done here though as well is to take the part that came off when we just undid this, cut off the top piece, cut off the sides, but keep the two clips, because then the board fits very snugly inside there and still allows us to have the heat transfer pad. The idea of this effectively is to make it as a slightly bigger heatsink, because then when this is put into place it will clip into position and just over the port itself, connecting to it, and therefore giving further surface area to help to cool the chip down. Doesn't get that hot, but every bit helps. A side comparison with the cut down jumper pack and this expansion pack, you can see is fairly clear. Doesn't look a great deal, but that is about 3/4 of a centimetre, and of course unless you're going to relocate this port, it's just going to stick further outside your case. Unless of course, as I'm doing, you're using the lithium batteries, which in themselves are reasonably thick, So by the time you've put your game cartridge, which is that thick, along with your batteries, which is about the same, you've then actually got space along the side to put them and also keep your expansion pack sticking out. That's why in this portable that I'm doing, I can have the expansion pack in the system. This is one of the combined memory rumble packs for the N64. When you take the top off, there's only a small selection of wires. Ignore the one that's already come off here. You've got two that go to the rumble motor. You then got two wires that go to the battery to provide power to the rumble motor, and the other component you have on here is a small battery which keeps the memory intact on the chip. The switch here, as you saw from the outside, selects between the memory and the rumble function. So what you can do with a board like this is to relocate the capacitors to keep everything flatter. You can also connect these pins to the controller directly, so you don't have the items sticking out at 90 degrees. And what you end up with is a card that looks similar to this. The two battery points are labelled here, and the two for the rumble motor are over here. As you see, the capacitors are relocated. You use some Kino wire on this because the distance is very short, but also the wire is very slim. It's okay as long as your distance is very tiny, like this, for example, up to 2 centimeters long. The side that contains the battery always goes towards the front of the controller as you're looking at it, and therefore the other one is going towards the back. As it turns out, I found a much easier way of doing it. If you wire first to the controller pins, then use a pair of scissors and cut through the wires and then solder them onto the memory card rumble pack. It does make a far easier and quicker job. It's very important to make sure that you can remove these boards as and when, because they do fail. You probably have already noticed that this is actually a different rumble memory board than previously was installed. The old one just literally stopped working for no apparent reason. The previous controller got a little bit flaky. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So you need to be able to make sure that with just removing a few wires you can easily remove the section in order to do maintenance work and also do replacements as required. One thing I did have to do though was to cut the end off here, which was for the D-pad, and then just wire directly to the traces. This decal will go on the back of the case, and just made it out of some self-adhesive paper, printed it on the old inkjet printer, and then sealed it with some clear varnish. To close the case up, we need to do two things. One of which of course is to put all the wires inside the case and behind all these teeth, and then secondly to line up the teeth so that the system will close. Once it's closed, we have 4 screw holes which we can then seal it down shut. As you see in this, I've managed to get the case shut, and I've used 4 screws in order to keep it in position. I will give these silver screws a little paint in red to make them look integrated. And now of course is the test before I put the decals on that everything is working okay. Here's the on-off button just down the bottom. Let's flick it on, and that effectively proves the system is working rather nicely.